Mosaic tile art. A mosaic uses tiles to create a picture. Tiles are ceramic pieces that have been glazed to create a color. They can be broken or used whole as small shapes to create a picture of something recognizable by putting matching colors in certain areas. This is Heather Richardson, and she is an artist in Safety Harbor, and she will be working with us to create a mosaic mural for our school that's something very similar to this one. Our school will have sea turtles in our picture instead of sharks, but it will be made from colorful tiles that students created and glazed in art class. While students are working in small groups on the mosaic tile project, the rest of the class will be working at their tables to create a paper mosaic. And here's how that's going to work. All of kindergarten through 5th grade will create a simple drawing on a piece of white paper. To fill in the drawing, you're going to be cutting colored papers into little squares, triangles, or other odd shapes. And we're going to be filling in the entire page by gluing the little papers near each other, side by side, very close, but not on top of each other, to fill in the space, like these examples I'm showing. For my example project, I'm going to start with a turtle like this one. Let's begin with a border or a frame around the edge of the paper. Use a ruler and trace it so it's parallel to the edge of the paper. That means it's going in the exact same direction, horizontally across the bottom and top, and vertically on the right and left. We're going to be filling in that frame with one color of paper, and we'll choose a different color for the inside of the picture. Now we're going to have to draw something very simple for our subject. So think of an animal that would be a good subject for a mosaic. Here I'm making a sea turtle. All of kindergarten is going to do a sea turtle with me. But as the grades get older, you'll be given more choices. The older students might want to draw a few details in the shell if they were going to do a sea turtle, and then each one of those sections could be colored in with different colored papers. But for kindergarten and 1st grade, I would keep it simple and not even draw these shapes. They're a little bit confusing, and it's easier to leave them off if you're young, but you might want to add them if you're in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, so you can do something interesting with the colors inside the shell. I'll be giving you color choices to pick from in the classroom, and if you're home, you might need to find some colored paper. You can always use a crayon to color the paper in if you don't have a color, or just add marker and crayon to it to create a texture. I'm ready to start gluing down some shapes, and I think I'll begin with my border. It's always good to start with the outside edges. Take your colored paper and a pair of scissors and cut strips. You want the strips to be about the same size. About the size of a thumb is probably good to start with. And then I'm stacking them all together, and I'm going to cut them the other direction into squares. Squares are the same length on all 4 sides, so I'm guessing where I should be cutting to make a square. I also would like some triangles too, so I'm going to cut my square from corner to corner diagonally. And now I've got some triangles. I'll be using these shapes to work on my frame. Before I glue them down, I will just show you what I plan on doing. I'm placing them around the edge, but notice there's a thin white space between each shape. Keep it thin. If you need to cut a piece of paper smaller, you can trim it down so it will fit. You do not want your shapes overlapping. Don't let them touch each other, but keep them rather close. I'm using my triangle pieces in all 4 corners. Did you notice that? And now I'm using a glue bottle to put a drop of glue under each one of my papers. There. Boy, that was fast. Here's a little pro tip. When you're gluing things down, flip the paper over And that way you can rub the back, put some pressure on it, move your hand around, and you're not knocking off all the papers that you just glued down, and your hand is not getting sticky. Now they're sticking much better. Okay, the next thing I want to do is start filling in some of the green for the turtle's shell and his head, arms, legs. And I've chosen some different shades of green, but I like this last one where I added crayon to my green paper, and now it has a real nice, interesting texture. I'm chopping it up into little squares, little rectangles, little triangles, and I'm putting one line of glue around the edge of my arm, my turtle's arm. Just do one shape at a time. Can you see the glue? Start with the edge, and we're going to place a little tiny square of paper on the glue all around the edge, creating like a little border around the edge of the arm. One shape at a time. You might need to cut them smaller if they're too big, especially when you get into those tiny corners there. They're very sharp. I'm going to keep cutting my pieces smaller and placing them near each other, but remember to go slowly so you're not placing them on top of each other. There's a little tiny space between them. Imagine if they were tiles. You wouldn't be placing them on top of each other or overlapping in any way. You'd be putting them side by side by side. If you need to trim something so it fits inside your pencil line, you can always use your scissors and cut it down a little smaller. When you're done outlining the edge of the arm, now it's time to fill in that little space in the middle. Remember, it can't touch another shape, so I've got to cut them small enough so they can fit into the space that I have left. That one's touching, so I have to keep moving it until I can find a way to not let it touch. I'm adding a little more glue to the middle because there was never any glue there before, and I'm cutting tiny little pieces that will fit into that space. Notice I'm doing the same color for the arm, and I'm going to repeat that same color in the other arm and the legs and the head too. They're all going to be the light green with the texture crayon marks on it. I've got one tiny triangle left, and I see where I want to put it. Sometimes it starts sticking to your fingers, and you've got to wipe your fingers dry on a paper towel so they won't be too sticky. Let's have a closer look at that. Notice the shapes are not all touching each other, but there's a little white paper between them. Now I'm outlining my second turtle arm with white glue, and I'm going to repeat the same steps. Remember that pro tip. When you're done gluing down all your little pieces, turn your paper over and rub the back so you don't knock off the little shapes. It's time to start cutting up some darker green paper for the shell. Now you could decide to have every section of your shell be a different shade of dark green, light green, medium green, yellow green, or you could start cutting up shapes and seeing if you can make them fit in like a puzzle piece. Because the glue is very wet, you can keep moving it around. Even though you've already glued your pieces down, they'll slide right around for a while until they start to harden. After the bigger shapes are put in, I'm cutting some smaller pieces so they will fit in the white spaces that are left. Sometimes I'll need a triangle, sometimes a rectangle or a square. But as soon as you can't fit another piece in there, it's time to stop, flip it over, and rub the backside. Now I need to look for some blue paper for my water. Here's some of the choices I have. I'm going to chop them all up into tiny little squares and then start placing them behind and around the sea turtle. As you can see, I've already done 2 rows of water. So now I'm going to take my glue stick. I want to show you that this will work with white glue or glue stick. So if you want to rub the paper with your glue stick, you can place your pieces directly on the sticky glue and it will stay. I'm remembering to leave a little white space between each one of my squares or rectangles, and I'm keeping them all in a straight line. I like how it looks when I use a variety of different types of blue. When I get to the hard to fit in spaces like right there, I'll have to cut some of them into triangles and measure out my triangle to see if it's going to fit in the white space without touching anything else. If it's too big, I'll need to trim it down a little bit smaller. I see there's room for one more triangle on the right side. If you have access to any patterned papers, you can use those too. Look at this pretty blue paper with the designs on it. I'm drawing a straight, horizontal line with my glue stick. Use plenty of glue. And then I'll put all the pieces on that sticky line. When squares or rectangles won't fit anymore, it's time to trim the paper down, smaller and maybe irregular. As you can see, I've jumped ahead here and I'm almost finished. I'm adding the last stripe of glue and I'll cover it with some dark teal paper to match the stripes I put above. Finished! Almost finished. For my final step, I will glue it on a black piece of paper and color in some of the eyes and smile. I recommend that you keep your subject large and simple with very few details. I have included some ideas at the end of this video, so you may stop at one of these simple designs and sketch it on your paper for your mosaic. Some of them are a little bit tricky for 1st and 2nd grade, so find one that you think you can draw and draw it right in the middle of your paper, nice and large. It can go all the way to the colored frame that you're creating. You can hold your paper either direction, so if you have something tall, you can turn your paper vertical. After looking over your choices, just pause on the one that you'd like to draw and draw it on your white paper. If you have another idea, you're welcome to do your own idea as long as it's simple and large with very little detail.